In the author's note of Life of Pi, Jan Martel, our author, presents the novel as a true story he discovered while traveling in India, also known as Bharat, and he describes meeting an elderly man who directed him to Pi Patel's remarkable tale of survival when he spent 227 days alone adrift over the Indian and then the Pacific Ocean. 22 over 7? That is also the fraction for pi. Martel blends fiction and reality. And this goes toward making the story, which is fictional, a bit more true. So, a more factual account of the story, even though it is entirely fictional. And he also discusses themes of storytelling and belief, hinting that truth is subjective. I love that. And the note frames the novel as one that will make you believe in God. So I have a story that will make you believe in God, emphasizing faith, imagination, and just overall the power of narrative, the power of first-person narrative. And here we've got a metafictional approach, and this blurs the lines between fact and fiction, engaging the reader. So we've got an entirely fictional story, and a story that's really difficult to believe. So spoiler alert. How is he able to survive 227 days aboard this orange life raft with a Royal Bengal tiger? It's difficult to believe, but we've got this author's note here. So is this author Jan Martel? Is it an entirely fictional author adding truth to an entirely fictional story? So this is what I mean when I say that the author's note, it blurs lines between fact and fiction. Is it true? Is it not? It is entirely up to you. Look, but the story didn't happen, but, let's just pretend it did. So this goes further in pushing another narrative of this idea of the better story. Stories that give us hope, faith, meaning, and how this aligns with religion, believing in something that others may not necessarily agree with, where there may be no factual basis, but it's faith that drives us. And Jan Martel also blurs between these two ideas with the introduction of Satish Kumar, the baker, the Sufi, the mystic, versus Satish Kumar, the biology teacher. So we choose what we want to believe, whatever helps you sleep at night, if I could put it like that. And this further engages the reader, and it sets the tone for a pretty interesting book. So in chapters 1 to 6, we have Pi's reflections and early life. The novel opens with an adult Pi Patel narrating his experiences, reflecting on his time in a hospital after his ordeal at sea, and his body suffered immense trauma, but he survived. And he speaks about his love for both zoology and religion. Zoology, study of animals; religion, the big three religions that are mentioned in the book in order: Hinduism, Christianity, and then Islam, suggesting that his survival story blends elements of both disciplines. Okay, and this foreshadows his ordeal out at sea, where his knowledge of zoology helps him in taming Richard Parker, in maintaining a safe flight distance. But that's the more practical side of things. Religion, it keeps him alive. It gives him faith that one day he will be safe. And this narrative, it shifts to Pi's childhood in Pondicherry, India, south of India. It's actually not a state, it's a union territory. And his full name is Pasine Molitor Patel. Pasine Molitor, it comes from a famous French swimming pool. So a family friend, Francis Adiru Basami, gave him this name and also taught Pi how to swim. And this, once more, it foreshadows Pi's ordeal out at sea, because he was the only one in his family that knew how to swim, so he survived. However, he shortens it to Pi to avoid being mocked as shame, Pasine Patel, at school. Shame, shame, shame. They teased him so much. Now, Pi's father, he owns a zoo, and Pi grows up surrounded by animals, so he develops a very deep appreciation for them and learns how they behave. Okay. So just bits and pieces, a nice introduction to Pi, his life in Pondicherry, India, why he has this love for zoology, why he has such interest in religion too. Chapter 7 to 14, we have zoological insights in animal behavior here. So our biology teacher, Mr. Satish Kumar, he's an atheist and teaches him about the scientific view of the world. Pi, however, remains fascinated by religion and spirituality. Okay, for those of you that are studying this book, I'm not going to tell you what it is. Someone tell me in the comments. What is atheism? What is agnosticism? And what are the key differences between the two? Someone tell me. Some bright spark. Help me out. Pi explains how animals in the zoo, they're not prisoners, so this is very important. This is his argument for why animals are safer in the zoo. But instead, they thrive in captivity because they feel safe within their enclosures. Now, this lesson about territory and dominance, it will become crucial later when he's stranded out at sea with a tiger. So, Pi's whole argument is that animals are safer in captivity in terms of safety, like no one's going to kill them, and they also have access, constant access, to food. They will be fed. They'll always have water. They'll always have some kind of water source, but out in the wild, they could go days, weeks without eating. Perhaps even drinking, dirty, contaminated, muddy water. There's also that threat of the food chain. They might be killed, but in the zoo, none of those threats exist, and that's why they're a lot safer. Now, this lesson about territory and dominance, if you guys watch the movie, so look, I do recommend watching the movie. It's not entirely accurate, but it just sets the scene a bit better. It just helps you to understand what exactly goes on in the movie. It just adds a bit more character to everything, just so you can get a feel of the atmosphere, who the characters are, just their whole vibe. And the father teaches him, Pi, and his brother Ravi a lesson about safety, about how Richard Parker is so dangerous. Don't get too close for him because at the end of the day, he is a wild animal. And this is done as a scare tactic, but also enforcing this idea of safety. Okay, and this will become crucial later when he's stranded at sea with a tiger. And he describes Richard Parker, a Bengal tiger, emphasizing how dangerous tigers are and how humans often misinterpret their behavior. So how is it that a tiger got the name of a human being? It's because the forest ranger who picked him up had a bit of a clerical error in his administration. And, well, the tiger's name was supposed to be Thirsty, and the ranger's name was Richard Parker, so it got swapped. So Richard Parker's name should be Thirsty, but there was a bit of a clerical error, and the Patel family absolutely loved this. They thought it was hilarious, and so they just kept it. Chapters 15 and 23, Pi's religious awakening and conflict. So Pi is a deeply spiritual being, and simultaneously, so at the same time, practices Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam. Born into a Hindu family on a nice mountain retreat in Munnar, he discovers Christianity with Father Martin and Islam when he goes to a bakery and he meets the other Satish Kumar, who is a Sufi, a mystic, and he sees him praying on his prayer rug, and he believes each faith reveals different aspects of the divine. So a very humorous but profound moment occurs here when a Hindu Pandit, a Christian priest, and a Muslim Imam, so religious leaders, all argue over which religion Pi belongs to. And Pi just says, look, I just want to love God. You can't make me choose. Your religion is not better than the others. I don't have to choose. I don't want to choose. I just want to be spiritual. I want to practice all of them. And his brother Ravi and his father, they begin to joke around a bit with him, saying that, if Pi adopts one more faith like Judaism or Buddhism, he'll be on holiday every day of the week. So, just teasing. And Pi's father, who's a more practical man, finds his son's religious devotion quite baffling and warns him that faith alone cannot sustain a person. So yes, be as religious, as spiritual as you want, but it's not enough. It's not enough. There's a more practical element to life, and God, religion, faith can only do so much. In chapters 24 to 36, this is the decision to leave India, and now our journey begins. So due to political changes in India, so Indira Gandhi taking the helm as Prime Minister of India and pushing out a few land reforms and policies that are affecting people in Pondicherry, Pi's father sees the writing on the walls quite early and decides, enough is enough. We're going to make the move now and we're going to go to Canada. So those are the political changes as discussed. And Pi's father decides to sell the zoo and move the family to Canada for a better life. Now, before they leave, Pai's father demonstrates the brutality of nature by making his sons watch a tiger, not just any tiger, kill a goat, teaching them to respect the power of wild animals. Okay, so this is very interesting, and it gives Pai's understanding of animals just completely different meaning. So, can someone please in the comments tell me, what is the difference between anthropomorphism and zoomorphism? Can someone tell me? So they board the Tsimtsum, a Japanese cargo ship transporting the remaining zoo animals to North America. So it is a Japanese cargo ship, and when the ship eventually sinks, we have some investigators from the Japanese, I think, Ministry of Transport that come to do a bit of investigation, and the remaining zoo animals to North America. So North America, Canada, the US, Mexico, and so on. Chapters 37 to 45, the Tsimtsum, it sinks and Pai stranded out at sea. A sudden storm, it sinks the Tsimtsum, and Pai finds himself thrown overboard into a lifeboat. So it's all gone terribly here. Pai's out at night, he's just chilling, vibing, and he notices the storm, he notices panic. It's crazy. The siren's on, sailors are absolutely just shouting, losing their minds. It's chaos. And he tries to go back to warn his family to get up, come to the top, but he can't because they're all already underwater. They can't swim. And if he swims, he's risking his life as well. So he realizes, yeah, it's a bit of a futile attempt. Maybe he can find another way. And on his journey to save his family, to get in, sailors just chuck him overboard into a lifeboat to save him. And in all of this chaos, a zebra, is it zebra or zebra? Leaps into the lifeboat and actually breaks its leg in the process. And our orangutan here has the name Orange Juice. Oopsie. Has the name Orange Juice and floats toward him on a raft of bananas. So, in the second story, the zebra is the sailor. The orangutan is his mother, OJ. Not OJ Simpson. It's a completely different story. The hyena is the French cook, the killer. And the hyena emerges from the lifeboat, revealing its presence. Now, Richard Parker, the tiger, is momentarily in the water, but Pai panics and pushes him away, afraid that he will kill him. And this gives Pai an absolute fright. So everything broke loose over these chapters, 37 to 45. We have a massive turning point. Y is equal to minus B over 2A. And it's all broken loose here. Pai's lost his family. He's alone on a lifeboat. He watches the Tsimtsum sinking. It's actually quite beautiful in the movie and heartbreaking if you read it in the book. Now he's all alone by himself with 3 animals. Or maybe these 3 animals don't exist. Maybe they are simply figments of his imagination. Maybe these were actually people. Maybe it was all a coping mechanism. Was Richard Parker actually there? Or was he animalized into thinking that he is Richard Parker? Because remember, Pai is vegetarian, but in terms of practicality, how are you going to get vegetarian food out at sea? You got to eat some fish. Descends into savagery, consumes his own fecal matter, urine. He's become an animal. He has descended into savagery, and so perhaps Richard Parker is simply a metaphor for Pai and who he is later on in the book. Chapters 46 to 57, the lifeboat's early struggles, and we've got a brutal food chain here, so a lot of killing going on. The hyena, the French cook in our second story, turns violent and kills the injured zebra in a very grotesque and drawn-out manner. Now, Orange Juice fights the hyena bravely, but is ultimately killed. So Orange Juice tries her best to fight the hyena, but dies. The hyena has now killed the zebra, and has killed Orange Juice. So, in other words, the French cook killed the sailor and Pie's mom. Now, Richard Parker suddenly leaps onto the boat out of nowhere like Randy Orton and kills the hyena. Watch out, watch out, watch out. Now, only Pie and the tiger remain. It's just the two of them, and Pie realizes that if he wants to survive, he must find a way to coexist with the tiger. So he must find a way to maneuver life, to maneuver himself, so that he can live peacefully with the tiger. Now, the tiger is an animal, and the only way to do so, to coexist with a tiger that weighs hundreds of kgs, is to establish dominance by picking up after the tiger, by giving it water, by feeding it, by establishing a flight distance. Can someone please tell me what a flight distance is in the comments? What does it mean in the context of all of this? And it's through that safe distance that he establishes, by providing for all of Richard Parker's most basic needs, that he'll be able to survive. In chapters 58 to 66, Learning to Survive at Sea, Pie finds emergency survival supplies, so biscuits, water, fishing equipment, but he knows they won't last forever, so he begins to ration it. Okay, so I can eat this many biscuits a day. I can drink this many milliliters of water, and he figures out how to use fishing equipment, but as we know, Pie is vegetarian, but in terms of practicality, he must eat, so he begins to fish, and, well, he abandons vegetarianism, not to skip ahead too much. Okay, so he also builds a makeshift raft that is orange. Remember, orange is the color of hope. It's a comforting feeling to him. The raft is orange, the lifeboat. The orangutan, OJ, was also orange, and in the second story, that was Pie's mother, so it just gives him a bit more comfort. And he makes a makeshift raft out of life jackets and ropes to create distance between himself and Richard Parker. This idea of flight distance once more. So hunger forces Pie to abandon his vegetarianism. He kills a fish for the first time, and then he just starts sobbing. Absolutely sobbing, because how could he do this? How could he rob an animal of their life just to sustain his? And, well, you can understand where it comes from. He's completely abandoned his principles, how he feels, what he's been taught, just so that he can survive. And he devises a strategy to train Richard Parker as well. Okay, he's training Richard Parker using a whistle to establish his territory and his dominance, and food rewards. Okay, treating him as a circus animal. This is very important. Establishing territory. This is my space, and Richard Parker, this is your space. I'm also going to take care of all your basic needs. I'm going to give you food, I'm going to give you water, and I'm also going to clean up after you, your poop and your pee. And that is how Pie is attempting to establish his dominance over Richard Parker. Chapters 67 to 81, we've got quite a bit of physical and mental despair here. These are by far the most grim chapters in the books because of all the shins: starvation, dehydration, exhaustion. Pie is absolutely battling. He's in the depths of despair right now. He's super hungry. His skin has also taken a beating. And now he's also beginning to hallucinate. He begins to imagine conversations with Richard Parker, and he even encounters a blind castaway who attempts to rob Pie and cannibalize him, but Richard Parker, almost pledging his allegiance to Pie, kills the blind castaway. But in the second story, as we know, Pie is Richard Parker, so perhaps it is Pie that commits a murder out at sea. Questions. So here we've got sharks, storms, and sheer loneliness. So Richard Parker isn't the only imminent threat out at sea. We've also got sharks. We've got storms. And remember, Pie is just on this little life raft, so he's absolutely battling to save himself amidst the natural elements. And all of this, it pushes him to his limits, but he perseveres. So his knowledge of zoology, taking care of Richard Parker, his ability to fish, abandoning his principles to eat meat. But it's not just that. We need something a bit more in our lives. Remember, all these stories of overcoming hardship, there's just something about it that we're drawn to. I mean, if you look at the 3 holy books that are in this book, Life of Pi, Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Quran, these holy books, they're full of these amazing stories of human redemption, about how we as human beings can overcome anything, how we're underdogs. And it's these stories of faith that push him to keep going, to persevere, to just stay afloat. Excuse the pun. In chapters 82 to 94, we've got our mysterious carnivorous island, and we've also got the final rescue. So Pi, he discovers a strange floating island covered in algae. So algae island teeming with meerkats. Meerkats, think King Julian in Madagascar. So absolute paradise because there's fresh water and an abundance of food. Fresh water, Pi can finally drink. He can replenish his depleted resources. Also eat some food. He can eat the algae. Quite a few things are edible here. And Richard Parker, as you would imagine, is absolutely feasting on these meerkats. However, Pi soon realizes that the island, in fact, is carnivorous and it emits. So to emit means to give off acid at night. And this acid, it dissolves anything on its surface. And Pi soon realizes this after he finds a human skull. It's crazy. And now he begins to fear for his life, and he and Richard Parker flee. They leave the island and they continue drifting. So this gives Pi a taste of hope, of freedom. It's almost teasing him like, oh, Pi, you're close. And we learn that it is true because he drifts ashore, reaches Mexico, and Richard Parker walks into the jungle without looking back. And this absolutely breaks Pi's heart. Why do you think? Well, Richard Parker, firstly, is Pi's last living memory of his life in Pondicherry, India. Everything is gone. His family is dead. He's in the absolute depths of despair. He's lost it all. It's just him and Richard Parker. Secondly, they just survived 227 days together aboard a dingy orange makeshift life raft. They coexisted together, and Pi is absolutely heartbroken that Richard Parker walked into this Mexican jungle without even looking back after everything that they've been through. He almost personified Richard Parker as though he was human. Someone tell me again in the comments, what's the difference between anthropomorphism and zoomorphism? And this is what broke Pi. After everything, you don't even look back? Yo, Richard Parker, you fake? Chapters 95 to 100. So this is the truth versus the story. Now, two Japanese officials from the Maritime Department, they interview Pi. Okay, Japanese officials because the Tsimtsum was a Japanese cargo ship, and they interview Pi to decipher the reason as to why the Tsimtsum sank. And they don't believe Pi's fantastical tale of surviving with a tiger. So in the second, which is a more brutal version of the story, the zebra is now the sailor. The hyena was the French cook, so the ship's cook. And the cook killed the sailor as well as Pi's mother, who was the orangutan. Now, Richard Parker was Pi. So Richard Parker being a metaphor for Pi, representing his own primal survival instincts, suggesting that Pi may have killed and eaten another human to survive. So, as I've said in the other videos, Pi descended into absolute savagery, descension into carnage behavior. He butchered fish and sea turtles. He consumed the fecal matter and he consumed urine of Richard Parker and himself, and he killed and perhaps even cannibalized that blind castaway that he met just before the algae island. But to still maintain some level of humanity, he said, no, it wasn't me, it was Richard Parker. So, what story do we believe? The officials are absolutely horrified, but when given a choice between the more fantastical version and the realistic version, they choose the better story. The first story, the initial story, perhaps even the true story, depends on what you believe. Perhaps all these animals were just simply figments of Pi's imagination. Now, the novel ends with the idea that truth is indeed subjective, and we believe what we choose to believe. Now, when I was a lot younger, my brother used to say this phrase to me so much, and it used to absolutely aggravate me. Whatever makes you sleep at night. And I never really understood what he meant until I got a bit older. So let me give you guys an example. So look, I'm just guessing a few of you have got some boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever. And you know, you're in matric, maybe they're going off to these parties, nightclubs, whatever. And you know, at the back of your mind, it's always like, oh, you know, they're going to cheat on me tonight. Or, you know, I'm not there, I'm in bed. It's a Friday at 9 p.m. Who knows what they're doing? And you toss, you turn, and all these ugly emotions and feelings, they just swarm your mind. No, that's okay. That's a very valid feeling. Humans have been going through the same thing for thousands of years. I mean, in the 10 Commandments, you know, adultery is forbidden. So, you know, what point is Goon School trying to make here? The point I'm trying to make is that trust them. Trust yourself, knowing that you've chosen the right person that values you, that is going to respect you, and give them all the trust. Believe them. Give them the benefit of the doubt. You've willingly allowed this person into your life, into your personal space, and you just trust that they'll respect it, because that feeling is absolutely liberating. You'll feel better, you'll have a healthier relationship, and that will make you sleep at night.